I live 3.5 miles from Stephen Wise Temple. At 8 o'clock in the morning, it takes me 45 minutes to get here. Thank God for podcasts and cell phones. And here's what I wonder the whole way up the hill. Why is it that no one in Los Angeles knows how to use a turn signal? Like, they exist, right? We learned it in driver's ed, but for whatever reason, we don't use them when we're out on the road. And I have a theory, actually. I think as cars have become increasingly comfort-controlled, which they are, and we can tune out the world around us, what cars let us do, we have our podcast, we have our phone, the seats give us massages, they're leather, right? The climate is perfect, the windows are tinted. It's this cocoon that we're in. We're out in the world in our cars, but we're actually shut off from the world. So what other people then represent for us are not people in cars. They represent obstacles in the way of us getting from one place to another. That's really what they are, right? And our goal is to get around them. And I think that it's a symptom, though. It's a symptom of a greater issue in society, which is, in general, we're disconnected from others in ways that we've never been disconnected before. There's a certain self-absorption and selfishness that's evolved. Think about it, if you will. Our society is increasingly individualized, right? We can watch the news we want when we want. On what? On our personal entertainment device. We don't even have to sit in our living room with our family next to us. We can sit in our bedroom with a screen in front of our face. We have personal shoppers, and we can do most of our shopping without even leaving our house. We expect airlines and hotels and movie theaters to provide us with personalized service. And when we do venture out into the crowds, we do everything we can to avoid those crowds. We get a fast pass at Disneyland or preferred parking at the Hollywood Bowl, or we try to get the TSA special line at the airport. But all that personalization has an unintended consequence. It's like an inoculation, like a vaccine, because we've forgotten what it is to share our world and ourselves and our space with others much more. And what comes from that is we're less committed to other people, and we're, by extension, less committed to our communities than we were in the past. Now, I didn't make up that idea. 21 years ago, a gentleman named Robert Putnam, he's a public policy expert at Harvard Business School, he wrote about it in a book called Bowling Alone. Maybe you've heard of it. And what he observed is that Americans are increasingly withdrawing themselves from social networks. Now, when he said social network 21 years ago, he didn't mean Facebook. Right? We think that what he meant was face-to-face conversations. He meant political engagement, public organizations, that we even know fewer of our neighbors. Because that disengagement, that self-absorption, is one of the ways I think we can explain the things going on around us, things like admissions scandals at universities, where getting my kid into school at any cost overrides fairness and honesty and actually the merit of others. Where there is so much hatred in our society, we see white nationalists with this extreme version of xenophobia that says, there's no room in my country for you if you're brown or Jewish or Asian or Latino, whatever, black, there's no room. Or the righteous indignation of anti-Semites on the left who say, my issue is the issue that trumps everyone else's issue, and your issue is somehow or another irrelevant, and then who takes the brunt of that declaration? History's most convenient scapegoat. The Jews. There's economic selfishness, where in this country more than since the roaring 20s, the rich are richer, the poor are poorer, and that great middle class that we built over the past nearly 100 years, well, it's disappearing along with the American dream. And how else do we explain neglect of the environment unless we recognize that there's a certain selfishness that says, I'm going to use everything I can in this world and I'm not going to leave anything for you. That's a certain selfishness. Now, I'm not saying that some self-concern isn't good, because it's important. We need it, but I think we've gone overboard. So I want to challenge you, and as Rabbi Yoshi said, the holidays are maybe over in terms of having to worry about tickets to come to shul and all those things. But Jewish tradition says, actually, the book of life isn't sealed. That it's open through the end of Sukkot. So all those Jewish holidays that come along, and even those 7 days of Sukkot is so much fun, there's actually an 8th day that's added on to Sukkot, so it's fully 8 days of holidays. want you to imagine this book of life in a different way. Instead of saying, how do I get in? I want you to imagine another way. What if you say to somebody else, I won't be written in the book of life without you? What does it take to declare that to somebody else? I won't be written in the book unless you join me. That's a radical statement of interdependence, human interdependence. And it reveals, I think, a truth that if we didn't have others with us in this book of life, life would ultimately be unlivable. So sometimes we forget how reliant we are on others until we step back and think about it. Think about the last hospital that you walked into, whether you were visiting somebody or for your own procedure. You saw a list of names on the wall. Did you ever ask yourself, like, who are those people? And if they weren't stepping up to do what they're doing, I wouldn't be able to walk into this hospital because it wouldn't exist. If anybody you know or your own child or even you received a scholarship to attend a university, did you ever think that university exists or that day school exists? Or that's whatever that school is, exists because people donated to support it? Because they had the vision that said, I'm going to bring you into the book of life with me, so I'm going to support this school. In the North Valley, there are 1,000 firefighters on the fire line. They are fighting a fire to protect homes of people that they don't even know. And yet they devote themselves, they dedicate themselves to saying, I will not be written in the book of life without you. It's incredible. And let's be clear, they're not paid enough for what they do. It comes out of a deep sense of dedication. Think of the people who take care of our children, of our parents, of our homes. How often do we step back and say, what are their needs? We can't be written in the book of life without those folks. And there's a corollary. They can't be written in the book of life without us. That interdependency is so deeply Jewish. I want to share 3 ideas that come out of the tradition that I think are some of the most important phrases in Jewish history, in Jewish tradition, that capture that essence. So the first one, Rabbi Yoshi spoke about love. Love is mentioned a lot in the Bible, and one of the phrases that I'm focusing on with these words to you tonight is the phrase, V'ahavta l'reyecha kamocha. Love your fellow as yourself. Think about what that says. Love your fellow as yourself. Love isn't just some fleeting emotion, right? Love is the most powerful emotion that we human beings, one of the most powerful emotions that we human beings can muster. And it's saying, extend that love to your fellow. Our neighbor wants what we want. One of the great rabbinic philosophers of the Middle Ages, Maimonides, said, it means that you really only want the best for your neighbor. That's radical. Love your neighbor as yourself. Then second, there was a passage, so Rabbi Hillel lived about 1,400 years before Maimonides. He took the phrase from the Bible, V'ahavta l'reyecha kamocha. He turned it into the famous Jewish golden rule, which is, what is hateful to you, do not do to another. So, right, it's kind of, if you're used to the secular golden rule, the Jewish rule flips it. What is hateful to you, do not do to another. What you don't want, your neighbor doesn't want. The things that we would abhor in our own lives, we can't just foist them on others. Think about what that means in terms of health care, housing, education, just general quality of life issues. And then here's the third one. Lo tucha lehit alem. That comes from the book of Leviticus, just like the first one. V'ahavta l'reyecha kamocha. Lo tucha lehit alem. You must not remain indifferent. You can't pretend to be blind to your neighbor's needs. And your neighbor can't be blind to your needs. That's also powerful. So ultimately, it's all about using turn signals, right? It's about being in the world. It's about caring about the world. It's about protecting our neighbor. It's about making sure that our neighbor knows that we care about them enough to use our turn signal so we don't turn our car in front of them and they don't turn their car into ours. It's a basic statement of concern for people in the world. And I know we forget, we're absent-minded, but it's because we're cocooning. We forget about them, so we forget our turn signal. We need others, and others need us. And here's where it gets really challenging. There are only about 45, 50, maybe 40 people in here listening to these words. There are a lot of folks out there who haven't heard them. So others may not respond to us that way. Others may not be declaring to us, I won't be written in the book of life without you. But even though they won't, we do it anyway. The sukkah outside It's dedicated to an organization called IsraAid. We had a representative from IsraAid speak to us a couple of weeks ago. It's an amazing organization founded by two Israeli men who, Yotam Politzer and Vani Glick. Their names deserve mention because they did such an amazing thing. They basically said, we're going to show the world how much the world needs Israel. Because only when we get out of Israel and show the world how much the world needs Israel, will the world realize how much it needs us. And so they created an organization called IsraAid 18 years ago. IsraAid is among the first responders on the ground all around the world. And here's what's amazing, with Israeli Jews and Israeli Arabs, EMTs, doctors, relief experts, aid workers, in Sri Lanka, in Peru, in Myanmar, in Georgia, in Sudan, in Syria, to help refugees, victims of cyclones and earthquakes and fires, you name it.
Just a moment.
Siri heard me. Syria. Syria. When the musicians phone.
That's the first time since I've been here.
Love it. So where was I? I know where I was. I have notes. All right. So what Politzer is saying and Glick are saying, basically through IsraAid, is what I've been saying from the beginning, that they refuse to be written in the book of life without others. And what's amazing is so many people have heeded their calls. Funders, people who have donated their time, have all listened to them and have actually stepped up and are doing it. And when they get on the ground, they stay there. And they help the places where they go become self-reliant all over again. That's an amazing gift. And it really is about writing other people in the book of life. So as we look around us and we think of some of the endemic issues that we're facing in our world, in our city, in our nation, we need each other. We really need each other. I want to end with a beautiful story that was told by a Rav Chaim from Ramshishak, someplace in Eastern Europe. This is the bottom line. And he tells of a dream he had, and he was taken to hell. When he got to hell, there were people sitting on either sides of these banquet tables, piled high with food. And their arms were, you've heard this before me, their arms were tied straight. And in hell, all the people were sitting at the tables, and they were vacant-eyed, and they were pale, and they were skinny, and they were miserable, and they were looking past their neighbor. And that was hell. And then he was taken to heaven. And in heaven, the people were picking up spoons that were right next to them, and they were reaching their spoons into the food in front of the person across from them, and they were feeding the person across from them. And as they were feeding that person, they had to look into their eyes. They had to smile at them. And the person across from them was feeding them. And what's the difference between heaven and hell, he said? He asked his congregation. In hell, they had the same spoons. They just didn't use them. In heaven, they knew what to do. They knew that they had to have each other in order to have the joy that was heaven. So that's what we have to keep in mind as we're going out there in the world, that our actions matter and that we need others and they need us, and we have to declare from the bottoms of our souls, I won't be written in the book of life without you. Amen.